I expect to have the same resources and I expect to operate at a level of excellence they have never seen at that organization, then you get mad at me. So stop playing diversity is stop pigeonholing me, because if you allow me to truly be free and operate in the spirit of excellence that I have been called to operate in, I promise you this organization will be better when I leave it than when I got here. But you know what? Y'all want to play.
So welcome to another episode of Innovation Insights, where we dive deep into the minds shaping the future of industries through innovation, creativity, and groundbreaking research. We believe that innovation happens in all aspects of life. I'm your host, Dr. Eulanda Sanders. I'm thrilled to introduce our guest, a true disruptor, trailblazer, and change agent, Dr. Monica Cox. Dr. Cox is a distinguished professor of engineering at The Ohio State University, where she served as the inaugural chair of the Department of Engineering Education. Her career has been one of many firsts, including becoming the first African-American woman to earn tenure in the College of Engineering at Purdue University. Raised in rural Southeast Alabama by educator parents, Dr. Cox developed an unwavering curiosity and a passion for making the world a better place through science, education, and authentic leadership. She pursued her dreams debt-free, earning degrees in mathematics from Spelman College, industrial engineering from the University of Alabama, and leadership and policy studies from Vanderbilt University. Along the way, she interned at NASA, gaining hands-on experience in engineering and innovation. Dr. Cox is a 2020 Fellow of the American Society of Engineering Education and a fierce advocate for women of color in STEM. Her research focuses on equity in STEM education and exploring women of color's experiences in the workplace. She has led over $20 million worth of multidisciplinary projects and authored over 130 publications. Beyond her academic achievements, Dr. Cox is the CEO of STEMinet LLC and the creator of the Stop Playing Diversity brand, which calls for a move beyond performative allyship towards sustainable diversity, equity, and inclusion. Dr. Cox empowers individuals and organizations to embrace authentic inclusivity through her workshops, keynotes, and social media presence. In this episode, we will dive into Dr. Cox's incredible journey, her insights on breaking barriers, and her vision for transforming workplaces and educational environments. So without further ado, let us welcome Dr. Monica Cox to the Innovation Insights podcast. Dr. Cox, welcome to the podcast.
Oh, thank you so much. It is an honor to be here with you and to just talk about this work. Thank you for this platform.
Oh, I have been a fan of yours for a while through social media. That's how I learned about you and have been following your work. And it's truly impressive. And so thank you for all that you have done to lead the way for scholars and women in education and engineering, and then also for women of color. So thank you.
Oh, thank you.
You have an impressive and diverse academic background, from Spelman College to NASA internships, being from rural Alabama, being raised by educators. So how did all of this shape your career aspirations and your approach to leadership?
Yeah. Having parents who are educators meant that I always had books in my hand or I was learning. So early in life, I had this love of knowledge. Being in rural Alabama before streaming TV, before the internet, before social media, we had books. Imagine that, books and libraries. So a lot of what I learned about the world came from reading. And I think that how I dreamed of places, ideas, and situations that were bigger than what I saw and what I knew on the dirt roads of Alabama. One thing that also impacted me was growing up in the late 70s and then the 80s and into the 90s in Alabama is that I had a chance to also see what it looked like to actually execute the ideas of integration.
Mm.
I wasn't that far behind. I saw the Ku Klux Klan rallies in the city. I saw the Confederate flags, but I remember, and I'm going off a little bit, but bring me in. But I think one of the most transformative things for me was also being in a place where I was able to question, not just by my parents, but in that community. I remember in fourth grade, we learned Alabama history. And you can imagine being in the Confederacy, we have a certain history that is taught. The good things of the Confederacy with Jefferson Davis and Robert E. Lee and all the generals, and it looks like. And we took a field trip to Andersonville Confederate Prison in Georgia, Andersonville, Georgia. And in preparation for that, I remember sitting in an auditorium and we are talking about slavery. And it was the story of it like glamorized, glorified slavery. That's the way I interpreted it as a fourth grader. And I just thought, I remember raising my hand and saying, you know what? I don't like slavery because I wouldn't want to be a slave. And I feel that story represents me in that I did have the freedom to say that I'd been exposed enough to books that would probably be banned today to actually think for myself at such a young age to say, I get what you're saying about that cotton and the cotton gin and all the economic things and how this has really violated and ruined the South and the Yankees and all this. And there were bad people, but I would have been a slave. So I just feel like that story is the story of my growing up and how it has informed who I am right now because I learned to think and I continue to think and I continue to speak and I continue to question. And that's from childhood. That was a lot. Help me out. Bring me back.
Oh,
Bring me back.
no, that's great. That's great. And you refer to yourself as a disruptor and trailblazer. And from what you just said, that makes sense. So, can you share a moment in your career where you truly felt that you disrupted the status quo? And there might be more than one moment.
Yeah. I have a story that I told recently where, as a department chair, I remembered coming into a department where people are used to doing what they wanted to do. And they weren't really used to diversity. They weren't used to Black people. And I knew as a young leader in that department, I could have allowed people to continue doing what they wanted to do. I could have given them all the money. I could have let the same people be in power, or I could have pushed against the status quo and allowed representation and governance the way that it needed to happen in a system that was not used to operating that way. And I sat with a mentor one day and I said, either way, I'm going to lose because the people in positions of power had access that could have possibly allowed me to move to what I thought at the time, I wanted to be a university president. I wanted to go into that line of power. But if I stood up for the people in my organization, and if I really was that leader who represented them and allowed their voices to be heard and opened opportunities for diverse voices, then I was going to be beaten down figuratively for that. I did not know the extent to which the punishment would happen. I knew that I would be ridiculed and humiliated and possibly not be reappointed as chair, which I was not. But I said, I've got to sleep with myself at night. These are the values that I hold dear. And at the end of my term, at the end of my time, I don't want it to be said that I compromised for a dollar or for access or for power. And it's just the moment where I had to decide who I was as a leader, who I was as a person, and say, I'm going to go against every every oppressive thing in this organization, even if I'm a leader in that organization, because this is the right thing to do for my people. So it was very clearly, I saw it. I saw the forks in the road. I knew what
Yeah.
would happen. It was interesting and hard, very hard. And
Yeah.
I don't regret that decision, but it was hard. It still is.
I can imagine. I can absolutely imagine.
Yeah.
Um, and as being the first African American woman to earn tenure at Purdue,
Mm.
and I'm sure that you were first in a lot of areas of academia.
Yes. Yes.
How has that been, and how have you cared for yourself? Because
Mm.
our audience will have other African American and Black and people of color leaders in academia that are the first. And so, how do you manage that?
First of all, I'm always surprised being a first. And I'm like, why? And I feel like, I'm like, what's the story about why someone else wasn't here in your 150-year history? Why am I the first? It's always that moment that, is it a setup? And I think mentally, I had to decide that even if there wasn't a blueprint, I couldn't be afraid to be the blueprint. Sometimes you won't have a blueprint. So it was that mentality that really allowed me to enter certain doors and be okay. My wellness, this is going to sound pessimistic, but it's what I've learned after almost 20 years here. I say, you know what? Roles are not always real. That floors people when I say that because I used to be very literal. It's like I think as a Black woman and to get into the doors, you understand there are certain ways that you must move. You must present yourself professionally. You must not make people angry because you don't want to come across as this angry Black woman. So I realized when I followed the rules and the rules were not enough for me to stay in position and to be safe in the position, my mindset flipped and I said, hello, these rules aren't real. And they're not, they may be real and apply in a favorable way to the majority. But even if I follow the rules, that does not mean that I'm going to benefit
Mm.
from these rules. And the disruptive mindset kind of came when I no longer tried to pretend that the system was not what it was. And that's where I got my peace. And I often tell people, this is my new one. I always feel like I have these things that come up. And I say, you know what? When you work in a circus, you expect to see clowns. So when something clownish happens, I'm like, oh, that's because this is the circus. I don't expect to see royalty at the circus. I expect to see clowns at the circus. Okay, this is clownish behavior. And the other way that I actually keep going is that I now hold to my values first and foremost. That is my guide. That is what allows me to move forward or to sit still. And I realize sometimes organizations' values are not even at the level that mine are. My standards are here. The standards of excellence, inclusivity, care, centering humanity. Oh, I'm up here. I expect this. And when an organization doesn't take care of people, particularly marginalized people and Black women, I say, you know what? I knew that's who you were. I expected you to be better, but I knew it. Now I must govern myself accordingly so that I am protected, so that I protect other people. And I know that I have to craft the rules that keep the people around me safe. So it's a new way to operate. And the thing that I noticed too is that people are like, man, that's so bold. I don't know. People, I'm keeping it real. May I keep it real? Am I allowed to keep it real today?
Yes, you are.
Everybody's like, how are you so bold? I feel like that it is very difficult for people to see a Black woman who is so, did you say that? I did. It's because I was valuable and precious before I came into this institution. I will remain valuable and precious as I've worked in this institution, and I will be valuable and precious when I leave. And so, in the same way that I would never allow anyone to hit me, abuse me, call me out of my name when I come into an organization that thinks that it can, I say no, because that is not part of how I operate. It is not what I tolerate, and you will not do it. Whether or not there's a law that says you can't do it, I say you can't do it, and that's what I stand by. And that's what offends. That I don't think I'm less than, that I don't act like I'm less than, and that when I come in a room and you present a law to me, when you present a rule, I'm gonna call you out about your rule, and when you violate that rule, guess what? I'm going to adjust myself to line up with the clownery that you're presenting to me. Oh, we're not serious? Imma have to clown a little bit too. I match energy, as the young people say. I match your energy. And we're gonna be clowns today, all of us. Is this the sermon?
Well, and this leads us into your brand, Stop Playing Diversity. I love it. And because diversity is a buzzword thrown out there oftentimes by organizations in industry, within academia. Um, and so tell us about that brand and how that evolved.
Yes, I'm so glad you asked that. I was ready to tell this story. Mm, it comes back once again to this organization. It's like, oh, this organization a lot. They contributed a lot to my overall brand. Because when I was interviewing at this place, I said, I am no longer going to tolerate disrespect. That's just where I was. I've been in an institution and gone through a lot of things, had done a lot of reflecting. And I said, when I come into an administrative position, I'm just not going to be that same person who says it's okay for disrespect to happen. So I had a meeting with one of the associate deans responsible for hiring. And I said, look at my blog posts, look at my social media, read everything about me because I am not going to change. And I asked, do you all play diversity? And now I know there was this, he looked at me weird and he didn't know what I was talking about. And he was like, oh, we don't play diversity. I said, good. But I'm going to tell you something. Don't hire me if you're playing. And they hired me and they were playing. So, of course, I had to act up because I'm like, you know what? The reason I push so hard, if anyone looks at the things I write on social media and how I move, it may seem like I'm very aggressive. Like, oh my gosh, now there's people I haven't done anything to you, and you're just talking about this organization and you're calling them out and you're telling them they're not doing right. You know why? Because I told you to read the contract. I told you that if you engage with me, this is what you're going to get. My everything was public. Everything was in your face. And I do think that there was a moment when people were like, yeah, she's bright. We're going to do something. But when I started pressing and saying, I expect you all to elevate your thinking and how you operate, all of a sudden, they didn't want me there anymore.
Mm.
So it is that bait and switch that you don't fully understand what you're getting into when you tried to hire me as a diversity hire, because people love labeling it, but that's what you were trying to pitch me as. But when I came in and I started producing and I started telling you this is what I need to be even better, because you know what? Let me tell you something. Let's break this down. For all the people who say, I'll say Black women are diversity hires, baby, we know how to work to such a point that we have to be excellent. Excellent is the norm. Excellence is the base. And so it's that whole issue where people want to put us in boxes, but when we produce, it's like, what is this? And someone even told me this one time. This was a unit that had formerly been a service department, a service unit. And someone said, you know what? They thought you were just going to come in here and maintain the status quo. They were going to put you in here as the Black woman to be like, oh, look at our diversity. But guess what? This Black woman's going to work. This Black woman's going to have a surplus in the budget. This Black woman's going to streamline processes and make sure that everything is as it needs to be. So when this Black woman starts telling HR, fiscal, development, and all these people that I expect to have the same resources and I expect to operate at a level of excellence that they have never seen at that organization, then you get mad at me. So Stop playing diversity is stop pigeonholing me, because if you allow me to truly be free and operate in the spirit of excellence that I have been called to operate in, I promise you this organization will be better when I leave it than when I got here. But you know what? Y'all want to play.
And so playing right now, because uh, right now many academic institutions have just removed the word diversity.
Oh, yes.
So they're not even pretending to play now
No,
at
no, no.
all. Not even pretending to play. So how do
And,
young scholars of color
mhm,
or scholars that are marginalized,
mhm,
what's your advice to them to be able to manage and cope? Because I have many of them coming to me
mhm,
asking for help too.
yeah. Um, I look at, it's Maya Angelou who says, when a person shows you who they are, believe them the first time. And I have a Stop Playing Diversity podcast that I've done almost like 90 episodes. It's on hiatus right now. But I had one episode where I said, when an organization shows you who they are, believe them the first time. And it's that part where I feel sometimes we have given organizations the benefit of the doubt, but it's time to be really truthful about what never really changed. When you think about diversity, equity, inclusion, it's not that we moved the needle so much, because if we'd moved it to a place where it was really sustained or sustainable, we wouldn't have been able to revert so quickly. Like it was just like, it just wasn't, the roots were not even deep enough for us to be like, whoa, we can't even pull this up. Baby, that stuff was so shallow. A wind came and just blew it all away. It's gone. And it's because I'm sorry, I'm gonna go off and then I'm gonna come again real quick. And it's because there wasn't really any meat there. There wasn't like the resources were not given to actually transform the system. And I think if I look back at like Black feminism, which I love the work of Patricia Hill Collins and Audre Lorde and Bell Hooks, I think that when you think about the master's house and the master's tools. Audre Lorde was saying that you can't dismantle the master's house with the master's tools. And I think that this is an opportunity to redefine how we look at systems. It's an opportunity for us to empower ourselves in different ways. It's an opportunity to dismantle with the very things that are part of our experiences as marginalized people. Truth, capitalism, patriarchy is always like covering up, politically correct, truth. This is what happened. I'm going to share it with others. The bureaucracy, the hierarchy, we put ourselves in boxes. But guess what? When you break that down and you're like, you know what? Whoever needs to know the truth, just like this episode, whoever hears it, I'm not hiding. I'm being real. I'm being authentic. This is the way it needs to be. Use it as you must. This is dismantling. And I tell people it's often the opposite of what the other systems do. If it's about secrecy, we're going to be transparent. If it's about building walls, we're tearing them down. If it's about isolation and individualism, it's about community. But these are things that are part of our communities anyway. And if we somehow hold on to the core of who we are and say, you know what, I'm not hiding this in these spaces anymore. I'm not scared of what you might do, because I have my fiscal situation together. I have a cohort of women and other people who got my back if you come for me. Because this is how we move. If we really move, look at the civil rights movement. If we really move the way we need to, I promise you, people won't be quick to try and tear down individuals because they know they're coming for the army. We need to go old school with how we think, with how we speak, with how we approach transformation and moving forward. It's about a people. I think capitalism has separated us. But when we come back to the heart and we're like, you know what, that's my sister over there. And it's almost like old school, we got a network.
Mm.
There's someone in every place who's out here for you to make sure that you're able to make it to that next level. When you truly understand that, oh, there's no stopping. So I think coming back, saying all that, The young people need to go old school. This is old school. This is what the Southern communities, like my rural Alabama community, this people shared. What's mine is yours. I see you're in need. It's you. Your arms are tired. I'm gonna hold you up. No one's gonna tear you down. And I'm gonna tell you one story that my dad said, and I feel like this represents this. But my father went to Alabama State University when the Montgomery bus boycott was happening. And as I told you earlier, like today is the 7-year anniversary of the death of my father. And I think it's appropriate that I tell this story. And I remembered asking him how you read about things like that. And it's like, how did you do this? And his response was very simple. He said, we walked and we gave each other rides. What? How did people for over a year who relied on transportation to get to work, to school, to do so many things, how did they endure that? The persecution. We walked and gave each other rides. And that's simple, but isn't it beautiful? Isn't it just like a beautiful comment, a
It is.
statement about something?
It is. It says it all. You just do it. You just support each other.
Yes, there was a mission. This is what needs to be done for all of us to be free. And we know the history of this and how we benefit, even me talking about being a first, being able to even work at these institutions where I work, whether they want me to or not.
Mhm.
We walked and we gave each other rides. Come on. That's
Yeah, thank you. That's such a great narrative on because sometimes in academia, we do see a division that's been made
Mhm.
among marginalized groups of not being able to come together and support change. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, thank you. Oh, your research is also another area that really is important in its STEM education. And you really have done some excellent work to support underrepresented groups within STEM and especially women of color. So tell us a little bit about that work.
Yeah. So I go back to the motivation of this work. And so when I was still at Purdue, I just remembered feeling, and that's the question that I still continue to ask, like, why am I reading all this literature that says that we have these issues, but nothing has changed? We know about microaggressions. We know about pioneerism and tokenism and chilly climates. So it's just everything I was reading was like, it's just bad. Really? And so I worked with a team of researchers, Dr. Ebony McGee and Dr. Joyce May, and I love it because I remember Joyce saying, so often we see like the barriers. Everyone's, oh, it's so bad, it's so bad, it's bad. But why do people persist? Why do they stay? What's the asset part of it? Why are they still here? And I think that really opened up an entire line of research that was really informative. But I will say the thing that was hard is that even as I was going through that research, I felt oppressed. Not by the research itself, but it's almost someone gets spiritual for 2 seconds. Because I remember as a Christian, this is something that people would always say. You go to hear a sermon and it's like a high word, and then you get tested. As soon as you're out, you're like, "Oh, yes, I'm ready," but then you get tested. And I feel like this work tested me. I didn't wanna persist. I had so much drama as a department chair. I had so much drama in academia that I just felt that I was not being that person who could say, "Oh, I persist because of my student. I persist because of this opportunity." No, I wanted to leave because it was hard and I didn't like it anymore. And so fortunately, my research team had an amazing perspective. And we did look and we saw that it wasn't just about me feeling this way, but there were other things that were happening, like wage disparities. Why? We were doing a whole bunch of service. We realized that geography mattered. So, if you're more likely to live me, if I'm more likely to live in Atlanta, then there's something also about this community piece that is really important. And if you are disconnected from the things that you could do outside work, that's going to impact how you work too. And like I said, I learned so much more about what is causing us to not be accepted and to hurt. But I feel it as a chair, I learned firsthand how to put the research and theory into practice
Yeah.
because it is really hard to stand up when you are at first. It is hard to stand up when you don't have other people standing up with you. It is difficult to stand on your principles more so than I had my kid when I was an administrator as well.
Oh
So,
my gosh.
yes, that's another story that I could
So as a researcher, sometimes you have that opportunity to apply it. So from your findings, from your research, how have you applied that in academia, in your work in academia?
Yes, it is one thing to do research. It's another thing to live research. And I now focus a lot more on the application. And that's where the performative part comes in. When you think about Stop Playing Diversity, it really is just about going from theory and saying, I want diversity, I want equity, I want inclusion, to saying, I live diversity, I live equity, I live inclusion, I live the difficult things that happen every day. And that has transformed how I have moved. And a few weeks ago, I was giving a plenary and it was at a grantees conference. And I've been a researcher, presidential award winner, all this stuff. And I told people no grant was able to comfort me at 3 o'clock in the morning when I couldn't sleep. It could not help me when I was getting harassed. And I feel that where I am right now, even as a human, not just as a researcher, is that I truly understand that we need something more because when I see women who are dying by suicide, who feel there's no way out because the policies do not address their issues, they are not being listened to. They're being harassed to death. They're dying on the job. They're getting cancer and other illnesses. Their relationships are breaking up, losing their families. Research is not doing it. It's telling us what's happening, but it's you know what, I'm gonna tell you something that came to me one day, and I'm gonna share it. It's almost if you have you've been diagnosed with a terminal illness, or you not even terminal. We'll just say you've been diagnosed with cancer, and people keep giving you tests. Okay, let's check out what's going on. Where is it located? How has it spread? What's going on? But you know what? Nobody want the treatment. We don't want to just know that we're sick because we know we're sick. We know we're ill. We feel the lumps. We see the symptoms. We know the fatigue. I don't need another test telling me that that I'm tired. I need a test I need a solution that's going to say, you know what? X, Y, and Z is going to give you 30 more years with your family.
Mm.
It's going to bring back some of that energy that you haven't had for 15 years. It's going to give you peace of mind at night. So you're not worried if you're going to die next year. That's what's up. And I feel we don't do enough to actually treat the issue. We patch it, we
Mhm.
test. That's nothing. We love experimenting. Oh, here's something that might work. You know what? I want the doctor that's going to tell me what's going to take it away and make sure it doesn't come back. And we don't apply that to higher ed. We don't apply it to the situations that are going on, particularly with women of color. And that's why people are tired and they burn out and they have no hope.
Mhm.
You're walking around cancerous
Yeah.
with no sign of any type of treatment in sight. But we're going to still press because I got to get that job, because I have to move forward, because I'm strong. And we just need to get to a point where we tell institutions, if you don't give me the treatment that I'm owed. I'm not doing this for you anymore. I'm not killing myself when you have the solution in that back room and you choose not to use it because you want me, because I'm an inconvenience to you. I'm not important enough to you. And I feel that's the thing. And I know I'm going off, but it just reminds me also of like when we think about human subjects research, we think about the Tuskegee syphilis experiment, that horrible violation of human rights. And think about it wasn't just about those men, it was about their families, people, things that still linger in that community, and how people don't even trust science because of an experiment.
Mhm.
And all over the place about research, but I just think differently about research right now. I'm not just
Yeah.
here to get journal pub. I'm not here to just get my H index up. I want the treatment. I want the cure. And that's not studying and poking and prodding people. Why you do this? Why are you so upset? Why is it so bad? No. Give me the pill. Give me the shot. Just gonna say
Right.
you're from this. And
Right.
when does that happen? That's why I do the work I do. That's where my thinking has transformed. That's why I'm no longer trying to go for the university presidency, because you know what? It's a distraction that's going to keep me from getting the cure. When
Mm.
I expose, when I tell you what's going on, I'm closer to the cure that way than sitting and having a board of trustees telling me that I need to go and tear down some DEI policies. Oh no, baby, that's not it. I don't care how much you try to pay me. I will never be an accomplice to my oppression. I don't do that to other people. You can't pay me enough to do that. And I think that when people realize this is dismantling, I told you there were a lot of carrots in 2020. And when people realize that those are carrots and the real thing that's going to free and cure and eradicate is when we say, your carrot can't move me from a bigger purpose.
Mm.
Your carrot make me oppress people just because the Supreme Court says that I have to, I won't. That goes against my principle. Remember what I say before. We walked, we gave each other rides. That means the person in a big home in the corner office at an institution that has every right to come and tear down their people
Mm.
has to decide, guess what? I'm walking today and I'm giving somebody a ride.
That's good.
It's, it's a choice.
It
And we don't make that choice.
The one choice that you have made, though, is to look at some other outlets as an innovator, and that is through your fiction, writing and
Yeah.
storytelling, and tell us about that part of your life, and how did that come about?
Yeah, I'm gonna tell you, since we last chatted, I've come up with some aha moments about this. So this is about to just be amazing. So I'm gonna tell you about the origin first of all. When I was grieving, I needed I needed something happy to do. And I would write these stories about women in academia, but they would have happy endings. And so it turned more into romance. Just say I was down, I was like, oh, I'm struggling on my job. I would have someone who left that job. She chose herself, her wellness. And I say that's different from what I've done. I wish I could have done that 10 years ago, 15 years ago. And over time, I realized every element I've written 4 novels under Beloved Publications, and I am author Monica Cox in all those novels. And I realized that every story had therapy. So somebody really was able to get healed. That was a part. Healing, there was restoration. And it was really important for that to happen for professional women. So that was the thing. And so just last weekend, I was doing some exploration, just reading some literature, and I was looking at a critical race methodology called counter stories. And counter stories are the stories of of marginalized people. It's centering those stories more so than the majority narrative. And I said, I think I'm doing counter stories. But as I started researching again, it said this is based on empirical data. So I started looking to say, I was wondering, are there fictional counter stories? Like, what's an example? And I realized, oh my gosh, we have fictional counter stories with Toni Morrison's Beloved. We have Octavia Butler's Parable of the Sower. And I said, you know what? I believe that I am doing fictional counter stories. And this is a form of critical race methodology. It's me sharing the story of what it's like to be a first and only someone who's going through these behind the scenes oppressive situations and a work experience that so few people experience. It has now become like an educational tool. I still say this. I write romance, full transparency. People still humping and bumping, and men are still fine. But doggone it, there's a lesson in that fineness too. There's a lesson. There's a lesson. And you know what? And I'm kidding, but I chatted with one of my grad students and another Black woman, and she's read one of my novels as well. She said, Dr. Cox, what about Black women in romance? Meaning our relationships. We don't talk about our relationships. We don't talk about the impact of these leadership positions on our marriages and on who we can date. And she said, I'm talking about this from a heterosexual perspective, but she said a lot of men don't know how to date professional Black women that they haven't seen it. And so it's really hard. And if they just haven't been educated, it's easy to get insecure, be insecure. It's easy to not know how on those hard days to move forward in a relationship. So let me tell you something. I began to realize not only am I talking about workplace issues, but I'm talking about healthy communication between partners who, when something bad is happening, this guy is like, you know what? You're still important.
Mm.
Those people couldn't value you.
Mm.
I'm going to restore you. I want you to be successful. I'm going to cook dinner for you because I know it's stressful today. Hey, start this business because you're an amazing entrepreneur and you have so much to offer. And I want you to be the COO. I want you to do something else. I want you to thrive. And even in my last book, there was a woman who was a counselor. And in her family situations, she always took on the burdens of her family. And they were somewhat abusive to her. They used her. But I made sure that the man who was her partner loved on her.
Mm.
And even when people tried to come at her, he was physically there to hold her up if she needed to be held up because they weren't going to do that to her anymore. She had given so much of herself, and it was time for him to pour into her so she could be built up, so she could move forward and she could become the woman that she needed to be. I said, you know what? Let me tell you one thing. Are you ready? I want to tell you one thing if I can, and you can edit this, but I want to give you an example of what I'm saying because I actually took a picture of it. There's a woman who's on LinkedIn, and I told her about my books. And she wrote a review for the last book that I was telling you about. And in that review, I said, I know something is happening because she said, this book reminded me of the importance of having people in your corner platonically and romantically. When I read the chapter where Noah met her grandmother, I cried. Jimmy's grandmother's love and care for her resonated with my own desires for meaningful connections. And this book is very relatable and informative, but she talked about therapy. She talked about experiencing pet to threat and workplace trauma and how she wants the Workplace Psychological Safety Act to get passed because I talked about that in my book, all these things that women go through. And I just hold on to this because I'm not just out here writing fake stories. There are people who say, I want that connection. And in another room, in another book, when there is a man who holds his woman down, as people say, they're like, their communication was right. I need somebody. That's what a healthy relationship looks like. That's how a man is supposed to support me when I'm down and don't think that I can get back up.
Mhm.
So this is real. So I just had to share that
No,
part where I'm just
thank you.
bad.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for addressing so many unspoken and unrealized aspects of being a Black professional woman.
Yes. Thank you.
No,
Thank you. I'm gonna give you a teaser too, because I was actually talking to a university president, and we also talked about beta men. People mean, what's going on with this? Think about the Black women who ascend to professional positions. The men don't represent that typical harsh cook my dinner lady and do all this other stuff. There's a different type of nurturing, a different type of strength that a man who is a first gentleman to a university president, to a Black woman, or to a Black woman who's in a position of power, period, has to demonstrate. And how often do we see them in books? The behind the scenes conversations, the like looking at my husband picks up my kid and they're like playing football in the house because it's raining or something like that. But it's that care. And I think so often it's time for us to squash stereotypes of what it looks like to be strong.
Mhm. Mhm.
So just know as a teaser, I'm thinking of that type of man. And yeah, we gotta share that man too.
Yeah.
That's
Oh,
so
okay. Thanks for that teaser for your next book. Oh my goodness. Our last question that we ask every guest is, how do you define innovation? And so, would you
yeah.
define innovation for us?
You know what? At first, I think innovation is more like technical because I'm from a technical background. Everybody's, oh, innovation. What's this new device, this new thing? And that's the bias that I think I have. But really, when I think about innovation, it is, I've talked about disruption a lot, but innovation is like using your tools to address situations that maybe have not been addressed before. And I've given a few examples today, but it's no longer just research that is going to help to address things. It's research plus being out of the box. It's actually questioning in new ways. It's like my books. It's saying there's a different way to do something or to present something or a different audience that we connect to. And there is a definition that I use based on some research I did a long time ago. And um, Goldie and Dorr, those are the people, they're in higher education. And they had a book called they talked about what it meant to be a steward of the disciplines. What does stewardship mean for doctoral education? And they had this really vague definition for teaching. And, or no, not teaching, transformation. So it's generation, which is creating new information, conservation, which is like maintaining the field. And it could be like in journal articles, for example. And then there's transformation. What does it mean to transform? And their definition was teaching in the broadest sense of the word. I had in my presidential research 40 people I interviewed with engineering PhDs. And I asked them, what does that mean? What is teaching in the broadest sense of the word? And it was the space of not just classroom teaching, but it's like outreach to people who are in K-12 education. It's so many things. There were so many things about teaching. And my aha is that I always wanted to educate people who would never be in my classroom, people who would never know me as a professor. And so when you see me do so many things, when you see me work on social media or write a LinkedIn post or start something with my business or write books, it's because I'm teaching in the broadest sense of the word. It is me connecting with my books to Black women who didn't even know I was going to talk about some theories. Racial Battle Fatigue by William Smith, Pet to Threat by Dr. Keisha Thomas and her colleagues, that I was going to talk about the Workplace Psychological Safety Act, which is there is no federal law for to end workplace abuse. People didn't know that. But when they read my books, guess what? I taught you something. I
Mhm.
taught you about
Yeah.
Julian and what he did. I taught you about the first Black department chair at Alabama State University. I taught you about Etta Faulkner and Ursula Burns at Xerox. I'm teaching you Black history, but I'm teaching you how you also can be empowered. I'm teaching you that you need to go to therapy. And if you're grieving, you don't have to grieve by yourself every day. So this is transformation. This is innovation. And I think it's going to pay off. I think it's paying off, but it's just how it moves. Yeah.
Oh, Dr. Cox, this has been Fabulous. This brings us to the end of our episode, and I truly thank you for your insights, your passions, and all that you're giving us. You're a great example of being authentic
Yeah.
and also being an innovator by creating spaces such as Stop Playing Diversity, and then in books and writing and literature, and creating that space too for people to explore themselves and
Thank you.
understand. So thank you, thank you, thank you. For our listeners, thank you for tuning in. And if you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe to our YouTube channel and leave us a review, and return for more conversations that spotlight innovation, empowerment, and change. So, as I sign off, please keep innovating, keep dreaming, and keep making a difference.